I've watched Broker Mike do his thing for a long time and I can help you out where I can. Give you my 35 years of experience of doing this, so running across a lot of things. So, all right, we'll get started here. And I understand my pages are different than your pages, so I'll try to go along here. So last class we were working with buyers and sellers. Anybody got any questions or anything that they dealt with that want to discuss in the class at all? All right. Anybody encouraging any challenges I can help you with throughout this Ignite class and your homework that you're given? Okay. All right. Then we'll skip that part. Oops. Did I hit the wrong button? There we go. So you've probably seen this a lot, the Y4 Cs, 2 Ts. When it comes to offers, probably the ones that are important in here are win-win. You know, everybody wants to get through get their terms, get their price, get what they want, but they also have to understand where the other party's coming from. And so it's got to make a deal come together. It's really got to, each person feels like they need to win. Okay. And sometimes it's just giving somebody $50 or, coming back with $1,000 counter offer to a buyer. Sometimes they feel like they won. They just feel like they got the last word in. So just keep that in mind. It's a win-win. The other thing that's really important on this to me, when you're dealing with offers, is the customer always comes first. Customer is number one. What they want, what they want to see in the purchase agreement, their goals. That's what counts. Okay. I've watched people come up to Broker Mike and go, what? I'm not going to get a commission on this. And Mike just looks at him and goes, who cares? It's not about you. It's about the client. Always is. We are just, I don't want to say this because we represent them, but we're facilitators. We're only the communicators in this, taking the information back and forth. We're not writing the check for the mortgage payment. We're not, writing the check to closing if the proceeds are short. We're just negotiators and facilitators. Keep that in mind. And when you get to that point where you've stepped yourself out of the transaction, you sleep better at night. Believe me, I know first 10 years in this business, I was married to contracts, it bugged me at night. And then when I got to the point where I'm only the facilitator, I would get a purchase agreement fall apart at 9:30 at night. I'd sleep like a baby. I would, because it wasn't affecting me. Yes, it was affecting my client, affecting what I was going to have to do the next day, but I still had a warm bed to sleep in. I wasn't being affected by this. So keep it in mind that when you can take yourself apart from your clients and not get emotionally involved in it, it's going to be an easier way for you to deal with things. All right. So today we're going to go through the offer process, preparing the offer, writing the offer. Those are on the buyer side. And then we're going to get to presenting the offer to the seller. And we'll go through some of the things there and on how to receive and respond to offers. And then we'll recap everything at the end. Any questions? All right. So this is kind of a good saying to keep in the back of your mind. I think that sales that's the ability to gracefully persuade, not to manipulate a person or persons to a win-win situation. And to me, what that means is that you need to understand your client's goals, either if you're working for the buyer or the seller, what their ultimate goals are. If you really have a good understanding and a good rapport with them, you can point out things to them during the negotiation process that, hey, wait a minute, didn't you tell me you really wanted this and this house has it? Isn't that going to be worth something to you? Know them. I think it's persuading, it's not manipulating them. I never want to pressure anybody into anything. I probably am the lowest pressure realtor around. I probably show too many houses because I don't close or convince people, but it's persuading them, pointing out, bringing them back to what was important to them, their wants and needs. Bring it back that way, and that's how you persuade them. You don't manipulate. Okay, talked about today's agenda. All right, so the offer process, buyer makes an offer. The seller responds it in 3 ways. They can counteroffer it, they can accept it, they can flat out reject it. If it's a counteroffer, we're back up to the top, so the loop continues to go. If they accept the offer, then we start becoming a little bit more linear going towards closing. Okay. Remember, during this, all parties are excited. They're nervous, they're anxious because they don't know the process. So help them through this. You're the professional. Even if it's only your second transaction, or even your first transaction, you know more than most people out there because you've had the real estate training, you've gone through the education, you know things that other people don't, that don't do this for a living. So just have that confidence that you are, that you can do this and help guide them through it. And even if it's your first transaction, refer back to the experienced people in this office. You know, we're here. That's one great thing about Keller Williams. I love that about our company is how helpful we are to everybody. So if you're new and you want to refer back to my office instead of me, my experience, say our office experiences, use that to help coach these people through it and deal with their emotions and their excitement during this time period. I think your participation guide has maybe some of a list of emotions people might be going through. Anybody want to share any emotions that they think the buyers or sellers might be going through during the offer presentation and writing up process?
Anxiety for sure.
Yeah.
The wait. I think it's excitement initially, like they think, oh yeah, I'm gonna get this house, they're excited.
Yeah, and it's
Like the crash.
the excitement. I'll tell you this,
Yeah.
their excitement makes their ears get plugged.
Yeah.
Because you'll be explaining things to them and they're so excited about where their couch is going or where they're not listening to you about the terms of the purchase agreement always. And you'll get questions. Did we cover that? And I'm like, yes, we did, but just gracefully go back and say, yes, we did. So the excitement plugs their ears sometimes. Just keep that in mind. Let's see here, my notes. Like again, my notes here say it's not our purchase or sale. And so keep your emotions out of it. Stay calm, especially when you're dealing with the other agent. You know, you might think that this is just, you might have you just steaming. Take a second, calm down, deal with the other agent, deal with your client in a calm manner. And it brings everybody down. You know, if you talk nice and mellow, you know, you can start excited, but bring your voice back down to a mellow tone. People respond to that. And it will bring their emotion levels down. So watch your voice tones when you're talking with somebody, even if I've been in many transactions where I'm just like pissed at the other agent. And I just have to bite my tongue and talk like I'm talking to my mom. Okay. Unless you talk to your mom real bad. So, okay. Really important during this whole process to communicate with your client, keep them informed of what's going on, even if you've heard nothing. I have presented offers and 3 hours later, I still don't know anything. I text my client, still haven't heard anything, tell you as soon as I can. And it just keeps them knowing that you care. And that keeps them kind of knowing where they are in the transaction. Good. All right. Put all of your offers into Command. Command's a great thing as far as tracking your business, giving you projections as what income you might have coming. So just use Command. It's a great tool that this company has put together. So use it. So far. Anyone? Great. So now we're gonna be preparing the offer. In your guides, you have a list of some of these things that are up here. So when you're preparing the offer, ensure the property is still available. So you walk out of the showing, your buyer loves it. Text that agent, call that agent, find out what's going on. Because you don't want to find out 12 hours later that an offer was being written right then. It might be too late. So communicate with that listing agent and know what's going on. Build rapport with the listing agent. You guys don't know how important this is in a multiple offer situation. I'm closing one this afternoon here, and I called the agent. The agent's old like me, been around this business for 30 years. We hit it off. I'm a D type of person. I like short conversations. Just give me the info and I want to move on because I got lots of stuff to do. I sat and chatted with her, let her talk about her clients. We were friends by the end of our conversation. I haven't even presented the offer yet. We wrote at noon. She presented at 4. We were done by 5 o'clock, first day on the market. That doesn't happen all the time. She had another offer come in while she was presenting my offer with the seller. They were old school. She had to go over and drive in front of them and sit down in front of them. And that offer came in that was a little bit better. They went with ours because of the rapport, and she just felt the transaction was going to go well with me. Okay. That if you've worked with an agent before and have had a good transaction, reach out to that agent, talk to them. That is one of your best things. Just make your transactions go smoothly. Communicate with the other agents, because if you have a good reputation out there, and I like to believe I have one, for all these years I've been doing it, you get special treatment by a listing agent. You do. You really do. So use that to your advantage for your clients.
Do you do the same to the other side too? When you're not listing?
When I'm the listing agent, yeah, I love, again, we'll get to that part, but when I have multiple offers and I got an agent I've worked with before and an agent that doesn't know how to write a purchase agreement, that's got holes in their purchase agreement, I'm gonna recommend my seller go with the experienced person if they're identical. You know, and I can't tell them what to do, but I'm gonna tell them that my experience is working with different agents or in their professionalism. And sometimes some of my clients can even see that in a purchase agreement. They're like, this thing just has gaps. Am I dealing with a professional on the other end? They know.
So you mean that the new agents compared to the experienced agents doesn't have more chance, huh?
You have a little bit of more challenges, let's put it that way, but you know, be personable with the other agent. Be knowledgeable, come to the classes on how to write purchase agreements. Run it past one of our experienced agents. If you have a unique situation, just make your purchase agreements look professional, and you won't be seen as a rookie. Yeah.
Thank you.
Supposed to pair you up and have you talk about things that might be important to a seller. Oh, I'm not that far yet. Okay. Inquire about activity. So when you're talking to that listing agent, find out how the showings are going. If they've only had 1 or 2 showings, yeah, it could be different than what your offer would be is if there was a dozen showings in one day. So I ask about activity, ask if any of those people have gone back for a second showing, if there's a potential that an offer might be coming in from one of those. This is your time to ask some questions from the listing agent. And if for some reason a transaction has fallen through, but it's back on the market for some reason, ask the listing agent, why are we back on the market? Sometimes it's as simple as the buyer just got cold feet. Sometimes there's stuff that pops up on the inspection that crashes a deal. Sometimes it's financing falls apart. So find out so you can help better represent your buyer. And then when you're talking with the listing agent, ask about the seller's motivations. When do they need to move? Maybe they're building a new house and they need 6 months, or they want to rent it back or something like that. Find out what you can do to make your offer most presentable for your seller. Now, sometimes your buyer needs special terms. They need a special closing date because they're coming to town and they need to be working by May 1st. If that's the deal, write it the way your client needs it, because you always have to listen to your client. Remember, we are what is that? We are obedient. One of our fiduciary duties. We are obedient as long as it's within the law. Okay, so whatever the buyer needs. Ask the listing agent how they want to receive the offer. This is a good thing. Some like that one that I was talking about that's closing today. That person liked to talk. I'd send her a text, never get a response. She loved to talk. Call her, find out, read the other agent. You're working your salesmanship as much as you're doing it with your buyer, you're doing it with the listing agent too. So find out what makes them tick and how they want to be communicated to. And then obtain the buyer's pre-approval letter. You should always have this. I would recommend having one before you ever put anybody in a car. And don't waste your time driving around and find out they're not qualified later. So always obtain that. You going on that, the buyer's approval letter. If you're in a multiple offer situation or any offer situation, having your loan officer contact that listing agent, not a bad idea. You know, they can confirm that the buyer's approved, all we need is the appraisal and we're ready to go, whatever it would be. Have that loan officer reach out to the listing agent if they're that type of loan officer. And if they're not that type of loan officer, find a new one. Seriously, you need a loan officer that's gonna work for your buyer and do whatever it takes for their buyer. So that's that part. Review MLS and tax records. So in the MLS, you're gonna see the supplements. Make sure you've read all the supplements, whatever's in there. If it's just the seller's disclosure statement, but sometimes we got TISH reports. Sometimes we got well and septic disclosures in there. Tax records, review that to make sure that you know if there's any back liens or like assessments that are owed on it. Make sure you're dealing with the actual seller. You know, look, match it up, make sure that the person signing the purchase agreement is the person on the title at the county. So review tax records on it also. And produce a competitive market analysis. So just like you would do for a seller to say, seller, your house is worth this much. Do it for your buyer. Do it for your buyer and say, the split entries in Colby Lake are selling between $325 and $350. This one's priced at $340. It's in that price range. You know, so they know, makes them feel more comfortable, makes them sleep at night. There's many times that your buyers will wake up at 3 a.m. and go, what am I doing? Am I overpaying? And they have buyer remorse. And by doing the market analysis, you've already told them that the price is okay. You're taking one of those things that's worrying them out of the question. So do that for them, puts them at greater relaxation. And it says down there, obtain the, I get rid of that part. As you can tell, I'm not a techie person. Get the disclosure statement, well and septic disclosure statement if it's there. City of St. Paul, City of Maplewood, Minneapolis, I forget what other cities have TISH reports now, the truth in housing and sale reports. Make sure you reviewed those. And if they need to be part of the purchase agreement, make sure they're part of the purchase agreement. Okay, I think I've covered all my notes on that one. Thank you for bearing with me. Any ahas from that? Anything earth shattering that I shared with you? All right. So now we're at writing the offer. Okay. So here's some of the things that you want to think about when you're writing an offer. The price and terms. Of course, number one, the seller's disclosure statement, make sure we have that. Any other disclosures? We got well and septic disclosures, make sure they're in there. Condominium, if you need a condominium rider for associations to that. Conveyances, that's what's going to be staying with the property. So what's going to be conveyed as far as personal property, things like that. Earnest money. We're going to actually go through a purchase agreement and how I fill one out. and what I think about when I'm filling one out, so I'll touch on earnest money in a little bit. The due diligence or inspection period, so we deal due diligence, different states do due diligence. We call it a home inspection period. That we'll talk about that. Time for the seller acceptance. We'll talk about, do you put a 24-hour limit in, or do you put a timeline in your purchase agreement? I'll tell you my experience, when you put, I want a response by Thursday at 5. Sellers don't give a shit. They don't, they just blow right by that, especially if it's in a multiple offer situation. They just like, ignore that. So I have had very few that worked. I did have one presented it to me on one of my listings where they wanted a response by 8 p.m. They wrote a very, very good offer, and my sellers could accept that. They went, fine, we're good. We don't have to wait another 2 days for any more offers. This one's exactly what we expected in multiple offers, so we took it. So we did respond in their time frame on that one, but most of the times they get ignored. Just an FYI. If you have an out-of-towner, I've done this for out-of-towners, and this gives you a reason to talk to the listing agent again and explain why you put this deadline in there, is that they need to have a decision by Sunday when they leave at 5 o'clock. So we need to know by Friday if this one's going to be accepted, so we can go on to the next house on Saturday. Explain that. So sometimes there are reasons to have time deadlines in there for a seller, but very few, mainly with relocation people or somebody that got a second house in mind. That would be the time you might put a time limit on the seller to accept your offer. Financing terms, we'll talk about that when I go through writing the purchase agreement. Buyer pre-approval letter, something you gotta have. We touched on that, get that from your lender. Closing date, gonna be in the purchase agreement. Usually they're 45 to 60 days out unless the seller has a special need. We'll talk about home warranties, repair limits. We don't really have repair limits in Minnesota. Wisconsin doesn't really have them. I don't know who's licensed in Wisconsin. Anybody? Scott. Okay, so we got a few people over there. I am licensed in Wisconsin. I have written one deal, so I'm not a great person on Wisconsin rules. Seek an expert on Wisconsin. We have a wonderful Wisconsin broker in Brad, so we're always willing to help. And then special clauses. When we're writing up the purchase agreement or going through a purchase agreement, I'll talk about special clauses that I might put in mine. Okay. In my notes here, the instructor notes here, it talks about love letters. I don't know if anybody knows what love letters are or has used them, but it's a letter from your buyer telling them how much they love the house. As a buyer's agent, I will give you broker Mike's, since he is our broker. No love letters. That's Mike's opinion. Love letters are liabilities, and they kind of are. Or they definitely are. I'll put it that they're not even kind of, they are definitely liability for your sellers. It's really a liability for your sellers. For your buyer, it might be worth, but I've had some love letters. I've presented love letters with my offers for buyers. I don't know if the listing agent always presents them, and recently I saw a listing where the listing agent, right in the agent remarks, no love letters will not be presented to seller. Listing agent doesn't even want to deal with them, so don't put one in. But you could help your client out by putting some in your email when you're emailing that letter over or that offer over. Put something in there. The one I'm closing this afternoon, I think this helped. The people that were selling the house, older couple, probably late 60s, 70s, knew they loved their house. These buyers love the house as much as they did. I put that in my they didn't write up a love letter, but I put that in my email to the agent when I sent the offer over. The buyers love this house. It feels like home for them, just what they were looking for. Also, they have an adult son with special needs that is going to be in a facility 3 miles away from this house. That is why they're buying this house, is to be so that they can take care of their son and be close to their son. bingo. And I think that's what did it for my clients. No love letter. It wasn't presented to the sellers, but the selling agent or the listing agent could use that as they wanted. I left it to them to use and present that as if they wanted to present that to the seller and tell the seller about my buyers. I don't know if that was a tipping scale or if they just love my buyers just love that house that much that the sellers just felt super comfortable with them. And so they accepted the offer day one on the market, 8 hours on the market, we got it accepted. So use that. But if you're a seller, never, you don't read them. If you're the listing agent, you don't read the letter never goes to your seller. Delete that page out of the purchase agreement. If they send it over in one big file, take that file and print it to a PDF on your computer and delete the pages that you don't want to go to your seller. They just shouldn't, because if your seller says, oh, our family's gonna love this house, and another buyer is a couple, and they chose the family over the couple, your seller could be liable in court. They had a preference. They selected one over another because based on the knowledge that they had. Yes.
So the son having a disability, even though disabilities are protected, that would be kind of a gray area because the clients themselves don't have this.
Their son who lives with them has special needs, and the facility that he goes to was up there. So I just said special needs. Did not say disabled, special needs.
Okay.
So use your
There's gotta be a
use your words properly. But I had a special needs adult son that lives with them that will be attending a facility up here. Is that I think how I stated it.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah. So be
That's
careful.
why I was curious of the wording,
Yeah.
because I'm like,
Mhm.
there's gotta be a better way of stating that, because that's, yeah.
Yeah, and if your buyer ever writes a love letter, keep it to the house. Keep it to this kids want to go to those schools in the area. Don't tell them about who they are, what makeup they are racially or anything like that. Keep it to, I love the house. I loved how you took care of the house. I can see us living here. That's the type of, if you do a love letter, keep it to the home. Okay. Don't have them talk too much about their own family. Okay. That was everything on that page. And I think this is where I'm going to switch over to. I hate this angle. See, where'd it go? There we go. So Minnesota purchase agreement is what I'm gonna go through here with you. And I don't know where it is. So I'm gonna try to make this a little bit smaller. There we go. I'm not a super techie guy, so any help you want to throw out, please do. So purchase agreement, if you use Instinet or the transaction desk, this is super handy. There are already free packages in there. So if you're going to start a transaction, if you haven't used this before, there's a listing contract in there. There's a buyer contract that Ann put together and is in there. It has all the forms you should need. I'm only going to go through the purchase agreement, but if anybody has any questions about any additional addendums or addendas that go with it, please let me know. Earnest money here. I say 1% is the minimum that you should have. So if you're writing a $300,000 offer, $3,000 earnest money. That's my standard. It's not a standard in the industry. It's not required. You only need $1. If you remember back to your real estate school, earnest money could be $1. But your earnest money can sometimes affect your negotiations. If you're in a situation where you want to show strong intent that the buyers really want this property, you might want to increase that. I've had a situation where I've had somebody put down $10,000, $20,000 in earnest money because they're making a lower offer. They're coming in below list price, but they want the seller to know that they're serious. That this isn't, they're just not going out here lowballing people all over town trying to steal a house. This is what they feel it's worth. And the earnest money is there to back that up, that they're gonna go through with it. Multiple offers, you might wanna throw more earnest money in a multiple offer situation to make yours look better. Tell you the truth, sellers don't get that thrilled about it anymore, about seeing big earnest money deposits. It doesn't affect your offer that much, but it could be the one thing that sways it. Okay, showing that your buyer has a good cash reserve. If they're able to put $20,000 down with their offer, they're a strong buyer. They got good cash reserves. It might influence the seller. Okay. So that's my thoughts on earnest money. I'm always going to be going to the listing broker. Sometimes I've had a couple transactions in my career where they want it held with the title company, or they want the earnest money held with an attorney. So that's where you would use the second part there, right here, if it's to be held by somebody else. Rare circumstances, the buyer brokers holds it. Maybe the listing broker is small, doesn't have a broker account. Haven't really run into this very often. I think one time in 35 years that the buyer's title or buyer's broker held the earnest money. So you can adjust it there. It doesn't always have to go to the seller. You do need to get it there within 3 business days after acceptance. Yes.
So if they ask for to add this by the attorney, so you just get the attorney information, let them to send the money before the month of it?
Yeah, so it'd be held by Bob Smith, Esquire. And you just would fill their name in there, or if it's gonna be held by land title or held by something, just state that in there in that blank. Yep. Then, you need to make sure as a buyer's agent to get that earnest money to them within 3 days after acceptance. A lot of people are using trust funds, real quick and easy, but there are, smaller brokers out there that don't do trust funds. So you might have to physically drive a check to somebody's office. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Because if you don't get it there in 3 days, it's actually, you are invalidating your contract and the seller has a right to cancel it. So, street address, legal descriptions usually populate, so make sure that that's in there. I just explained to the people this section right here, everything that's attached to the house. Anything that's screwed or bolted to the house is gonna stay with it.
But the
And,
refrigerator, this kind of stuff is not bolted.
pardon me?
The refrigerator, oven, I usually
Yep.
add all those. to it.
Yep, so when you get down here to this line, that's where you add the stuff that can be I say taken away, but the stuff that can be put in a moving truck. You want to adjust it right here. And then sometimes there's things that the seller says, I'm not, the wine fridge in the basement, not staying. Chest freeze or something. Get everything in black and white. I'm a black and white person. If it's written down and everybody signed by it, there's no discussion. It's done. So there, if all of a sudden the garage refrigerator disappears at closing, well, that was never in the purchase agreement. And the personal property does not apply to what's in the MLS. So it might say stove, refrigerator, all this stuff is staying. And you don't put it in there, it's not there. It's not part of the purchase agreement. So make sure that if the stuff that's there in the house is written in that area, you definitely have to have it in there. It just, some people thought, oh, it was in the MLS, it's included. No. You didn't put it in the purchase agreement. They sold the stove and fridge. I've had that happen. So black and white, everything's in black and white. Purchase price, so you've discussed that with your client and what they want to put in there. It's ultimately their decision. Everything is ultimately the client's decision, but you can help guide them, give them some parameters to be within. So down here, we just fill out, if they're doing FHA, it's 3.5% cash. If they're doing a strong conventional, it's 20%. If it's a cash deal, it's 100 on this line. And then you're gonna fill in, is it gonna be mortgaged? Is it gonna be assumed? Assumptions, you guys run into an assumption in your lifetime in this business, I'll be very surprised. There's very few assumptions out there.
I think they're becoming more.
They'll become more common. I mean, I had somebody recently go, oh, my FHA mortgage is assumable. Well, they were asking 400,000 and the assumable mortgage was 280. Who has $120,000 to come in and assume a mortgage? Now, there might be some other creative things you do with contract for deeds and assuming that mortgage, but assumptions are pretty much gone. So, and then contract for deed. If you do a contract for deed, seek out broker Mike. Because they're tricky. There's special terms that you have to have, and you actually need to have an attorney draft up the final contract for deed for closing. So, again, used to do them a lot. 25 years ago, did a few contract for deeds. Haven't done one in the last 25 years. So
Seller need an attorney or the buyer?
you're gonna need it for both. I mean, the ultimate contract for deed needs to be drafted by an attorney. We have a form in the MLS that fills out basics parts of it. But the contract between the buyer and the seller has to be drafted by an attorney and signed by both parties at closing. Because it's a contract. So that's why they need to do it. And a lot of title companies have their own attorneys on staff, so they usually handle it for you.
On the title.
Yep. Closing. Like I said, typically you talk to your mortgage person, they tell you how quickly they can get it done. I usually tell people it's 30 to 60 days, more likely 45 to 60 days to close a loan these days. They're quicker. I mean, they're not as busy right now, so 30-day closing is pretty easy to do these days if you really need one. But again, check with the seller. What is the seller looking for? What type of closing do they need? Do they want to close and have the house for 2 days and rent it back for 2 days so they can move out easier? Those are all things that can help your purchase agreement be better. Yeah, so that's my thoughts on closing date. So when you get to this mortgage financing, you need to check, is there going to be a mortgage or is it going to be cash? If it's cash, it is not. Okay, and I suppose under a contract for deed, there would be a is not also. And then you check what type of mortgage it's going to be. Is it going to be a first mortgage? Is it a first and second mortgage? Conventional, DVA, any of those things that are on there. Check what applies. Anybody got any questions about financing or types of financing? Okay. This rural loan is really good. If you get outside of the 7-county metro area, excellent program. If you guys ever work outside the 7-county metro area for say properties, find a lender who knows about these USDA loans because they're low down payments. They can get in with some assistance and stuff like that also.
So that's a good loan, sir.
It's a good loan. It's a good loan, but it doesn't apply to the metro area. You got it. Yeah, so it's outside the 7-county metro area and I forget, I mean, most of Wisconsin, it applies to, so it's used a lot over in Wisconsin, just across the river. So under this part here, this is where you're gonna look like a good agent or you're gonna look like a crappy or new agent. Everybody writes market rate in here.
That was my question.
You know what you've just done to your client? If their interest rates go to 10% and they can still afford the house, they're paying a 10% mortgage. Okay? Market rate is not what you put in there. No, no, no. Put in a percentage, always. And even if you have to go half, let's say rates are at 6.5, put 7 in there. Give your client a cap. Give them, because we don't know what's going to go on in this economy. If something happens, a war breaks out or something, the rates could go through the roof and your client is obligated to act. When you write market rate in there, they're obligated to that rate, okay? I don't want to see market
So
rate
you
from
just
any of
check-
you. And if you're presenting an offer to me,
You check them on the day market?
call your loan officer. You're writing the loan, call them. What rate should I put in there?
Okay,
That's how you do that line. Or if you watch rates enough, you know, I got different people that send out rate sheets to me and on email blasts, so I kind of know. But ask your LO, And then, how many years? 15, 30 years, you know, if you write 30 in here and they take a 15-year mortgage out, no big deal. You don't even have to change purchase agreement, so, just how many years they're gonna do. Mortgage financing contingency. This one, okay, there's two boxes to check. This first box says if the buyer can't get the loan all the way up to the date of closing, they get their earnest money back, or if you fill it out, refund it to buyer. The second option here is gonna be what your seller wants to see. Is buyer shall provide seller a written written commitment by a certain date. Okay, usually 30 days. Again, talk to the loan officer. They'll usually tell you 30 days, I can get you that letter. This is the one that gives the seller protection, because down here it says, I'll summarize, it says, if you don't supply the letter by that date, seller can terminate the purchase agreement and move on to another one. Seller's an ultimate power, they're in ultimate control there. So this is the one you want for seller. Also states in there that if
Line 76, what will you?
I would check 76 and I would put 30 days out on this line right here. Yep, about 30 days typically. And if you're writing a 30-day closing, make it 1 week before it. That's real typical in the industry is if you're closing in 30 days, the commitment letter is going to come in 21 days. Okay.
And you always check forfeited to seller,
Pardon me?
you always check forfeited to seller.
If I was representing the seller, yes. If I'm representing the buyer, they would be refunded to buyer. Okay.
And line 76, day of the day that you're closing, 30 days.
No, this would be the day, this would be 30 days from the time you write the purchase agreement.
Okay.
That you're gonna submit a credit approved letter. You know, they've been through the appraisal, they've had their credit checked, they've had their employment checked. Give your lender 30 days after you write the offer to get that done.
What question, if I heard you right? Did you say that if you're representing the buyer, you would check refund to buyer, but if you're representing the seller, you would put refund to seller? Why would that be?
Because you want to protect your seller, you know,
Okay.
if this thing goes south, you know,
Yeah.
6 days later. And you want some compensation for your seller if possible.
Okay,
I will tell you my theory on earnest money.
Yeah.
Earnest money is kind of a joke. Because if a buyer cancels their purchase agreement and wants their earnest money back and the seller fights about it, that house is off the market the whole time you're fighting. Can't be sold again. Well, it could be sold, but subject to a cancellation of another purchase agreement. So it really comes down to it. If your seller wants that house back on the market, they got to get back your earnest money. Otherwise, they're going to be in court. So most sellers don't have 60 days to go through a court hearing. They want it back on the market. They're going to refund it to the buyer. More than likely. That's my theory. That's what I've run into, my experience. So, yeah.
Now, I had a question. I understood now is line 70 and 76, are those either or?
Either or.
Either
Yep.
or. Okay.
Yep.
Because I would generally do 76 and put the
Oh,
written
yeah.
statement.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say on 90% of the offers I've written
Right.
recently, maybe even 95% of the offers, I'm choosing option 2, set line 76.
Okay.
Just because my offer has to look good.
Right.
If I'm a listing agent and I get an offer with 70 checked. If it's longer than a 21-day closing. I'm gonna want the second box checked. If it's 21 days to a closing, or, you know, 4 weeks to a closing. That approval letter is gonna come at the time that the loan's approved. It really is. It's not gonna come up 30 days in advance. It's not gonna come. But if you have an extended closing date, let's say you got a 90-day closing date with your seller. You wanna know that's good, that this loan is going through 30 days from now, you don't wanna find out 90 days later that this sale is gonna fall apart. You're protecting your seller. You wanna know on day 30 that this is gonna close on day 90.
So I had this situation that when you're losing the job, you're in the process and if something happened and you're not qualified for that.
Yep.
By writing that statement and letter, then what happened if after that, the day 60, the buyer not be able to, go forward with it.
He's got a good point, and you're gonna have to know your client a little bit, but if they did lose the job, they're not gonna get, okay, so let me preface, go down here a little bit further on this. It says, if that letter is supplied, if that letter is delivered to the listing agency and everything is good to go, and it does not close, the seller gets the earnest money. States that in here. So in your situation, if somebody, all of a sudden that letter comes through and says they're fully approved, and 2 weeks later they lose their job, you're probably gonna lose their earnest money.
So how we can, if we choose the first one, the line first one, then that would be protected.
That would be protected. That would be 100% protected, but you might not get the seller to accept your offer with that first one.
Wouldn't that also be protected if we said refunded the buyer at the bottom?
This part down here,
That would be a financing, you see that at that point, their financing would fall through, it would have nothing to do with the written statement, at that point, if they lost their job, their written statement was provided, right?
it actually states,
Say it's subject to X, Y, Z things.
upon delivery of the written, if this purchase agreement does not close. For any reason relating to financing, including but not limited to interest rate discount points, the seller may, at the seller's option, declare the purchase agreement. And if the seller declares a purchase agreement, they need to sign. And said cash is directing all earnest money to be forfeited to the seller. So if it's provided and it does not close, your buyers have lost their earnest money.
So then what's the point of the refunded to buyers forfeited to sellers at the bottom then? If it's already in like,
If it's not provided. So if your loan officer cannot provide the letter, then does the seller get to keep the money? Or does it should be refunded to the buyer?
gotcha, okay.
Those two, I say refunded to the buyer. So if the letter is not permitted, or not presented, if I'm representing the buyer, I would want refunded to buyer. If I was representing the seller, I would want the retained by the seller boxes checked if that letter is not provided. Because now the buyer has motivation to get you that letter. They might be losing their $3,000 of earnest money if their loan officer doesn't get you that letter by that date. So that's how those two boxes work. Make sense to everybody?
Some of the good agents that accusation always ask for 103. You need to provide that letter.
Yep.
Anything else?
And kind of people where I would be more stickler on that letter would be if I'm dealing with a lender I've never heard of before. If I talk to that loan officer and that loan officer seems shaky or slick, I might say my seller wants that money if you don't give me that letter. Trying to think of some other spots where I would want to. Yeah, if maybe even internet lenders. I don't like internet lenders at all on my listings or my buyers. I've had too many issues with them. Let's just put it that way. Things that are promised that don't come true. Let's put it that way. So on the internet, you get a lot of promises and a lot of things change. I'll put it that way, okay? So, that's that part about the financing contingency and delivering that commitment letter. Questions from anybody on that part? Locking into interest rate, I always just do 115. Anytime prior to closing as required by the lender. Gives your buyer the option to float the interest rate if they think interest rates are going down, gives them that option. Yeah, so if I'm writing an offer, I always state that. Lender commitment to work orders. So what happens here, the appraiser goes out and appraises the property. And they're looking for health and safety items. Or with FHA, they're looking for a few more things. So if the lender comes back and says, you need a handrail, that's a work order. And until that handrail is installed, that loan cannot close. So lender commitment to work order says the seller is committing to repair X amount of things. Normally, I'd have to say probably 90% of my purchase agreements have a zero in there. Because typically I'm dealing with conventional buyers. And conventional lenders are very relaxed on the house. They don't care. They don't really care. They're looking for mold. They're looking for missing handrails. And not much more than that. FHA, now on the other hand, might be looking for deteriorated leaky basement. FHA ain't gonna do a leaky basement without it being repaired. They're looking for peeling paint, you know, and a conventional mortgage will accept peeling lead paint. But FHA won't. So if you had a house that was peeling paint, you might want to put $1,000 in there that the seller is gonna commit to $1,000 of repairs to that house based on what the appraiser says, okay? So it's straight up appraiser. So let's say we exceed that $1,000. What can happen here? Is the seller can just go ahead and make the rest of the repairs. So it costs $1,200 to paint the house. Seller just says, do it. I'm gonna go move forward. If it was more than that, he could negotiate the cost with the buyer. So Mr. Seller could say, nope, it's gonna cost me $2,000 to fix the paint. I'll commit to 1,000, you commit to 1,000, and we're moving forward. Bingo. Or they can just declare the purchase agreement null and void. They can say, too many repairs, ain't doing it. Wisconsin's a little bit different. They have you right to cure, not right to cure, things like that. So changes a little bit over in Wisconsin, if you're licensed over there. Okay, and then this box, who pays for that reinspection fee? So if the house isn't meeting bank standards, who pays for that? My theory always used to be seller should pay for that. They didn't have their house in good enough condition. That was my theory. Lately, I'm checking the buyer box because I've had purchase agreements rejected because I chose the seller box. In a multiple offer situation, I don't want my sellers or my buyer's offer rejected because I checked that the seller has to pay $150 for someone to come back out and inspect the house. $150, I've lost the deal. So I would pay that reinspection fee to my buyer if necessary. So, and today, that's my thoughts on this line right here.
I suppose the market affects the lens that you're looking at your purchase.
Definitely.
You know,
Huge where you're writing your offers. Because in the last 5 years, my offers have changed a lot. So, and I'm telling you where I've changed them. So you know what I'm doing today. FHA escape clause. This states in here that you want to put a purchase price. So if a buyer is buying the house for $400,000, that's what's going to be on that line, that it must appraise for $400,000. Conventional mortgages do not have any protection like this at all. So if you are in question of a house being worth it on a conventional mortgage, you may want to add an appraisal clause like this. Something similar to what FHA says. And put that in your purchase agreement. And where I would put that would be down here under, where would I fit? I'd fit it right in here, other mortgage financing items, okay? So that is the protection for FHA that a buyer is not overpaying for the house, okay? If it's a VA buyers basically have the same thing written in there. It's just not spelled out the same way. But the house, for a VA buyer, the house has to also appraise. Conventional buyers, it does not need to appraise unless you put that verbiage in there, okay?
You just put the price, the offer, right?
The offer price, yep. And with today, you know, with escalation clauses and people going over list prices and things like that, buyers are choosing to call gap coverage. Make up the difference. So if it only appraised for 450 and the purchase price is 500, buyers are saying, I'll come up with that extra 50 grand and close the deal. We won't have to worry about it. So there's gap coverages that you can put in there as far as your multiple offer languages too. I'm not going to get into that. That's a whole nother fun class of ways to get your offers accepted. But that's another way to deal with an appraised value on a property. Lender processing fees. Put a zero in here. There's no fee that a lender has to charge back to the seller. There might be some lenders that want to. It's just more money in their bottom line. But put a zero in here because your offer is going to be equal with everybody else's offers out there. So there's that on that one. DVA funding fee. So FHA has MIP, conventional has private mortgage insurance, PMI. The VA has a funding fee. That's their mechanism to insure their loans. Okay, so there's, what is it right now? I don't remember the percentage off the top of my head. Been a long time since I've done a VA mortgage, but so the VA borrower is borrowing $300,000, and let's just say it's 2%. So there's $6,000 of PMI that or mortgage insurance that needs to be paid. The VA person can add it to their mortgage, so now their mortgage is 306. Or they could ask the seller to pay that $6,000 and their mortgage would just be $3,000. So it's kind of like closing costs. It's going to be deduction from the seller. So be careful. If you're in a multiple offer situation, you're taking money out of the sellers, you're making your offer less by having the seller pay that. They can pay it cash at closing, the buyer could, if they wanted to. Just keep that in mind on how that works with VA mortgages. We don't deal with a lot of VA mortgages, but we're gonna see more of them. We're gonna see more of them coming up. And so that's what they're talking about with that lines 141 through 144 there. The VA mortgage insurance, okay? There's the DVA's escape clause. It doesn't appraise, what I did is I kind of took this escape clause and I took the FHA escape clause and I wrote my own conventional escape clause. Just using some of the wordage there. So if you want to have a conventional escape clause, that's right. I just kind of combined those two and made it into one. And then seller's contribution to closing costs here. So you choose is or is not, depending on your what the situation is. And then I had a lovely one last year. Was it last year or the year before? Person checked here, put half. He thought he was, or he put 3. He thought he was putting it down here. So he wrote the purchase agreement that my seller would contribute $3 towards the closing costs. When I presented it to my seller, I said, this is the situation. This is how it's going to come back, just to let you know. But that is a sign of a poor agent. Let's put it that way. Okay. Somebody who didn't even take the time to reread his contract or look over his contract to see if he had any mistakes. Yeah. So there was that whole transaction. I could drink beer with you and tell you that transaction. That was a fun one.
Everybody make a mistake.
Yeah.
In this situation, I mean, now mistake happen, I mean, you're right, we should review it, and then sometimes, it's forced to give the offer at a certain time, we see stuff, I mean, we should accept that.
Yeah, and I mean, you've been around long enough. If somebody, then I knew that mistake right from the very beginning. As soon as I read it, I knew what was going on and I knew what his buyers wanted. So when I presented it to the seller that way. I said, here's the real situation. So you'll learn, but yeah, people make mistakes.
Sometimes I would say it's rapport. We talked about rapport with the listing agent. Remember my first Wisconsin deal, I literally talked to that listing agent. I go, okay, I'm writing in Minnesota all the time, not here.
Mhm.
I asked for grace, really, and he laughed, he said, I get it, where I told him I St. Croix Valley guy, and I got that one, and he called back, and you're gonna want to slash, because of the Wisconsin one, they want you to cross strikeout.
Strikeout
I
stuff,
missed
yeah.
a few things, but I made a couple mistakes, and
Yeah.
it was okay because of the rapport, but I get it,
And I know this last year, sometimes it's 10 o'clock at night and I'm writing them up and And I've made mistakes on them. I mean, even as a 30-year experienced guy, I check a few boxes wrong, but
I think the one that makes me laugh the most sometimes, actually, no, not sometimes, every time that I see it, it makes me laugh real hard. Is when we have the number of mortgage years. And people put 360 because they're thinking months. And they don't do it. And I'm like, 60 years. Wow, your plans supposed to be vampires, because I don't know anybody that'll live that long.
you know what's funny? I have never seen that.
Really?
35 years of doing this, I've never seen 360 in that, no, in that way. That's interesting.
Well,
But you've seen it a couple times.
When you see it now. Yeah, no, I've actually seen it quite a few times.
Interesting.
And I've only been licensed for about 2.5 years, but I was.
But interesting.
So,
Mhm.
If you receive I just want to base on, I just let. Two offers, one agent made that mistake.
Mhm.
Would it affect the way you present it to the seller?
No, not at all. I would present this and say, to my seller, I would say, I believe this line is mistakenly filled out. And then I would look at the merits of the offers. And if they wanted to accept the one with the mistake, they just fix it with a counter offer addendum. You know, be real easy to fix. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm. Inspections, so here's some, I don't even know, I think I might be over on the time limit I'm supposed to spend on this section, but I don't care. Inspections,
good information.
yeah, and then I don't think you can explain the whole purchase agreement in 25 minutes to anybody.
If you do, you're doing a great
Yeah,
job.
I teach this class, just the purchase agreement, I spent an hour and a half on it, so. Inspections here, the buyer elects or declines to have it. I would never, ever recommend to a buyer not to have an inspection. Never, ever say that to anybody, please, because now you're liable for anything that might come up later. You know, it's their choice. You know, you could point out, hey, the roof's new, the furnace is new, this and that. Those are the things that an inspector might inspect. Your choice if you want to have it done. Never make any recommendations on radon or anything like that. Let them decide if they need an inspection or not. And so the purchase agreement is or is not contingent. I would check, I mean, if you're doing an inspection, I would check it is contingent upon the inspection. I've had a few, I had one earlier this year, it was not subject to the inspection. They just wanted to do an inspection. And they wanted permission from the seller to do it. And we're like, okay, but you're not coming back with anything, you know, we're not gonna renegotiate. So that would be the only reason you might use is not when you elect to have one. But that's kind of that situation. And then point out to your buyer that the inspector needs to be a qualified inspector. They need to satisfy themselves as the quality of that inspector. Uncle Bob is not an inspector, okay? Unless he's a licensed contractor. Now, if Uncle Bob's a licensed contractor, it actually states in there, it used to, qualified inspector or tester. The language used to be that a licensed contractor, it could qualify as that qualified person. So if Uncle Bob is a licensed contractor and knows what he's doing, he can be an inspector. But Uncle Bob was just, oh, I own 2 houses. I know everything about houses. He's not an inspector. So let your buyer know that. And then this line 177, seller does or does not allow intrusive testing. 99% of mine does not. Okay. Because intrusive testing means that they get to cut holes in the walls, they get to both take stuff apart, look at it more intensely.
When you accept it, if something come up to inspection, then they need to do that, right? And then you talk to the seller to see.
Payment makes a great point. If upon your surface inspection, you find something that says, we need to dive deeper, get the seller's permission to dive deeper, to take things apart. The one situation where this 177 gets checked is stucco homes. Stucco homes have the potential to have moisture issues behind the walls that nobody can see. And so that's where you'd want to have permission from the seller that you get to test. You get to drill holes in the house and test for moisture.
They basically just do a core sample essentially, right?
There's different methods. There's different methods that I've seen. There are methods where they drill from the outside. And then they caulk them up with a matching caulk.
That's basically what I've seen.
I've had it done from the inside. I had one company with a high-tech moisture container, or system, do it without poking holes in the walls at all. It was a very intense infrared camera that he used. I've had people do it with just the moisture probes. So they're a little moisture detector that has two little fingers that stick out, and they touch wood, they touch sheetrock. So there's different ways to test for it. There is one company out here, Certified Moisture Testing. They are the best. So-
Because Wedgewood had trouble with that.
Pardon me?
Wedgewood had trouble.
Well, yeah, a lot of Woodbury really had a lot of problems with it because we had a whole bunch of stucco homes out here. I mean, whole walls rotted away. You pull off the siding and there's no studs in the wall. They've rotted away at the bottom. It's bad. And it is not only stucco homes. It can happen to masonite homes. It can happen to any home where water is not controlled. So take some courses on that, really do. They're ProSource, or what are they now called? Kaplan has some really good classes about water intrusion and how to prevent it, or where you might have issues. I think Structure Tech has a CE class that you can take on now. There's about looking at houses as to where the water goes, flows off of roofs, where it might hit siding. Because there's spots in houses that are rotten, that are behind vinyl siding. And I know it. I've seen it. I've pointed it out to buyers. And I'll go up on my salt box, what it's called, for a little bit. Take a lot of classes on house science, please. Knowing how houses work, knowing how things function, they really help you when you're walking through a house with a client. It takes your knowledge level and your expertise level. It takes you from here to here when you can point out something to a buyer that they don't discover. I mean, I know I've walked through with agents that, oh, isn't this pretty? No, that dark spot up in the corner is probably mold from a roof leak. But you know, they don't know that. Know some stuff so that your buyer can rely on you and maybe not spend $500 on an inspection on a house that's going to be really bad. So that's my little soapbox. Lauren knows.
When I first started, I actually reached out to a bunch of investors and asked if I could shadow them. If I
Okay,
could just be a shadow and taking all the information as they're going through a house.
that's
That's
great.
what I learned.
Great idea. Up until COVID hit, I probably attended all but 10 of my buyer inspections from the beginning, 3 hours, sitting in the house with the inspector over their shoulder, learning everything about a house. I'm also a licensed contractor, so I know some of that from that avenue. But before I became a licensed contractor, I would attend the inspection. So if you can find an inspector that allow you now, I think they're getting more relaxed. If they would allow you just to be over their shoulder while they're inspecting things, you will learn a lot. Okay. Total sidetrack there. Sorry about that, but that's my opinion on being a better realtor. So then you're gonna put a time frame in here. What I'm seeing in most things is 7 to 10 days. Multiple offer situation, you want to keep that shorter. You might even make it 5. Call your inspector. How soon could you get out there? If you're in that competitive situation, that might make the difference of getting your offer accepted or not. Okay,
And the seller countered back just the other day, asking for a 3-day inspection. I'm like, are you kidding me? That would make it was on Friday. I'm like, or on Thursday. Yep, that would have made it Sunday. And I'm like, there's no way. That's ridiculous. No.
I had some-
Get the 6.
I had somebody point that out, and I said, we can't even respond to you within your time period. So, yeah, so,
I do my best not to end my inspection period on a weekend
yeah,
because of that very reason. People go out of town.
that's a very good point. I've never thought about that. Thank you. I learned something today. Don't end your inspections on a weekend.
holiday.
or a holiday. That's a very good point.
Because I've had it where, sellers went out of town and I couldn't get a hold of them. Well, you're not gonna be able to get a hold of them for any negotiations or an extension. I run into both.
And here's something else to do. My fun deal about the guy that put the half of the whatever in the closing cost. He gave me the inspection result at 10 o'clock on the day it expired. I got a 70-year-old lady. I'm not calling her at 10 o'clock at night I said, this ain't getting, oh, you're just, we're going to go into it, but he told me I was shafting him on his inspection period. I said, you waited till the very end to get it to me. And yeah, that was a very fun transaction. Yeah, I could tell you stories on that one. So that's another thing to think about when you're replying, because I'm just gonna get into line 185 through 191. What it basically states is that, let's say we put 7 days on there on 183, that's 7 days for everything. That's for the inspection, the report, the negotiations, everything. So if day 7 comes and you're still negotiating, make sure you get an extension with an amendment. Because if that expired and you're still negotiating, your buyers accepted that house as it is. Because that time period, because that's what it states in there. If you don't raise an objection, or we don't come to a decision as to how anything's dealt with, the house is being sold as is. So make sure that that time period is adhered to, okay, to protect your client, and give it time. Don't give it 2 hours before the deadline. Like that one agent. So,
What did you do in that scenario? They gave you the last moment, you didn't have time.
I didn't do anything with it till the next day. And dealt with it through his broker. I finally went, give me your broker. I'm not dealing with you anymore. So I went over his head. And I went to the broker and I said, this is the way your agent's acting. This is how it's proceeding. Here's our situation. And when I talked to my seller, I said, even though we're past our deadline, we'll give them $1,000 towards the repairs of the house. Even though we were past the deadline, you're working for your seller. I'm trying to keep the transaction together. I'm not going to caboose. I'm not just going to crash this thing. So I went to the broker, said, we don't need to do this, but we will do $1,000 and let's keep moving forward on this transaction. So that was that situation. I just got rid of him and went to the broker after that. Never dealt with him again. So
So you can do that.
go over, yep. And if you need broker Mike to go to the broker, need me to go to a broker. I'm not the broker, but I'd make the phone call. I got enough experience with this. I'd make the phone call, but yeah. It's okay to go to the broker. Because this agent was doing a really bad job for their client, very bad job for their client, so.
It's bad in the brokerage, too.
Yeah. This was a broker who was building a team and just stuck a rookie agent out there showing houses for it. Yeah. Mhm.
The problem solved after you reached it.
We got through it, yeah. And he was a part-timer, I'd never get a response from him until after 3:30 in the afternoon. You learn who you're dealing with. Okay. Other inspection items. So in this area, I have put in things like, well, I had a transaction where the seller refused to let us do a sewer scope. That's intrusive testing.
Do a what? Sorry.
A sewer scope, running that, they consider that intrusive. I went, what? So I have written in here, if you think it might be an issue, or just to cover your butt. Seller will allow the buyer to perform a radon test and a sewer scope as part of their inspection if they choose. Now you got the seller to agree to it. So, something you might want to put in there. I rarely put it in there. But I use it as you want. But I just tell you my story of why I've used it. The other thing under inspection items is multiple offers. And, people are waiving the inspection to get their offer accepted. If you got a buyer that's not comfortable with that, they just said, I can't do that. I just want to know if there's major things. Put a dollar limit in there. buyer will not address any one single item that is less than $1,000, less than $2,000. Let me see, I think, I think I can do this. Is it pull up my clauses? Thought it. Come on. Oh, it's not pulling up my clauses.
You have to select the text box first.
Oh, okay,
And, no,
add clause, there we go. Thank you.
Yeah,
I told you I'm not techie.
it was popping up in the lower corner.
Oh.
It's not gonna catch it, it flashed up there.
So, that's, appraisal contingency clause, appraisal guarantees, I got some different ones, inspection guarantee. So. We'll check that one to go in. And so you can read, buyer agrees to assume up to $2,000 in repairs resulting from the buyer's inspection and resulting contractor estimates. If contractor estimates total less than $2,000, the buyers agree to remove the inspection contingency. So that's how I wrote mine. That way, my multiple offer was a little bit better. Sellers not gonna think that the buyer's nickel diming them. Not looking for anything little. They just want to know if there's something major in the house that they need to be aware of. So that's the way I address that. It's worked sometimes it hasn't, so but it's an idea. It's an idea to make your offer more competitive.
I let the listing agents know, like, hey, yeah, I'm up for a 10-day inspection period. But it's to make sure that we can have all of our ducks in a row with that. If the ducks are in a row sooner, we'll just sign an amendment stating that we're moving on.
Perfect,
Problem solved.
perfect.
I've done it where I've just stated that we're not looking for minor repairs, they're just looking for structural items, kind of communicating, we're looking for walkaway items.
Mhm. And I've had people say that it's only a structural inspection. They're only going, they're only going for major components. As a listing agent, don't trust that. And you know where that one went. So, yeah,
Yeah.
so, yeah, there's different ways to address the inspection contingency to make it less of a hurdle or less of an objection for the buyer.
But I really like what you said on that.
Pardon me?
What icon did you hit again to see the drop downs?
Those are my clauses
Oh,
that I put together, and if you want me to,
oh,
if you want me to, when we're done here, I can take an amendment or an addendum and put all my clauses on it and print it out for you.
That'd be
I
awesome.
think I can do that. And like I said, I'm kind of techie, or not techie, but we'll figure that out. Okay.
Would you be able to email that also to the people online? That would be great.
I'll give it to Drew and Drew can read it. Okay,
Okay, I'll put out my email on the chat, so you know if, so you could email it, or he could email it to us. That'd be great. Thank you.
sale of buyer's property. So is it gonna be a contingent deal? Is it gonna be a non-contingent deal? Okay, 3 choices here. The first box says the house isn't even sold. It hasn't been listed, maybe it's not listed, who knows where the status is, but the purchase agreement is the buyer cannot perform on the next house until their current house is sold. From a buyer's point of view, gives them protection that they're not gonna own 2 houses. And some people can't afford to own 2 houses, so that's your only method you can do. From a seller's point of view, if this is my only offer, I might work with it. If I got multiple offers and somebody says I gotta sell a house first, that one's going to the bottom of the pile. I'm gonna work with a non-contingent buyer first, okay?
The cash goes. in.
Yeah. 2 means the buyers have sold their house. And it's in the process of going towards closing. So if you're a buyer, you just write it in there, what day it's supposed to close. If you're represented by buyers, you write with the address and when it's supposed to close. If you're representing the seller and you get box 2 checked, you're asking, where's it at in the status? Have the inspection been done? Has the appraisal been done? Do you have a commitment letter? You want to find out where that backup sale is in the transaction. I mean, if the inspection hasn't even been done yet, you gotta be cautious for your seller, you know, because that deal could fall apart. And now your deal falls apart and you've missed out on that week of marketing time for your client. So, make sure that, you do the due diligence and find out where that house is. Ask, you know, pull it up. They give you the address right in the purchase agreement, pull it up. See how saleable you think the house is, so that if it does fall apart, is it gonna sell again right away? You know, is it in a area where there's shooting up houses all over? Might not sell. The area of high demand with low inventory, gonna sell again if it falls apart. So that's you being a good advisor to your seller by doing that research. If you get that number 2 in there. And number 3 is if they can perform without selling, you know, first time buyer. Move up buyer that's already sold their house and has the money in their hands. Cash buyer. I just wrote one last week where the sister is giving the money to her sister to buy the house cash until she sells her house. Got a proof of funds where it's coming from and stuff like this, but her sister was able to make it so that she was able to buy non-contingent. Real estate taxes and special assessments. Tell you the truth, guys, I just checked prorated the date of closing, prorated date of closing. The next part that talks about special assessments, I'll show you what I do there. And then if the property is part or non-homestead classification, is the seller gonna pay the non-homestead classification? If it's a duplex and it's gonna be used as a duplex, no sense in making an adjustment for the non-homestead. But if it's been somebody's rental property and now it's gonna become your single family home, get an adjustment for that non-homestead taxes. It's not a lot, so don't scare your clients. You guys are too young, but when I started this, non-homestead to homestead or homestead to non-homestead, 3 times, 2 to 3 times the amount of taxes. It was crazy. So you always check, seller will pay non-homestead portion. In today's world, from what I understand, the max is about $400.
Yeah, it's not.
So it's not a deal breaker for most people. So that box, you just want to have the seller pay the non-homestead portions if that's what you choose. Yeah. Yeah. And then it just says buyers will pay the taxes later. Under special assessments, I check all the boxes that the seller pays. If there's been an assessment against the property or back taxes that haven't been paid, that's not the responsibility of the new buyer. The seller should make it clean to that date. That's my opinion. That's why I check seller shall pay on those boxes. Now, some buyers or some sellers, they're getting a new street. They're like, well, wait a minute, that new street's happening this summer and I'm selling in May and you want me to pay for that assessment? I'm getting no benefit from it. Some sellers will have that attitude, just so you know. And a buyer can assume that assessment. Just check with the lender and make sure they still qualify if they assume that assessment. So it doesn't always have to be paid by the seller, especially in that situation where they're gonna do streets after closing. And it's gonna really be the buyer's benefit of having a brand new street. Maybe the buyer would pay for it. It can be negotiated. So that's my part on that. Down here, you're gonna check the box. The seller has or has not received a notice of a new project being assessed against the property. How Minnesota kind of works is they start sending out notices in December, maybe November. We're thinking about doing this work. And then in January, February, they usually say, we are going to do this work. And then about March, they tell you how much it's going to cost you. So that's the process of a seller knowing if there's an assessment coming up against their property. They get letters in advance. So if your seller has never gotten a letter from the county or the city or anything like that, probably nothing's going to happen that year. But if they've received a letter, now you're gonna have to deal with that it's called a pending assessment at that time, okay? So, and then if something does come up that's new, so something does come up, a new assessment, who's gonna pay for it? The paragraphs are 240 through 248 says, We're gonna negotiate that. If we can't come to an agreement of who's gonna pay for that new assessment, our deal crashes. So that's how that part gets dealt with. Previous additional provisions, if for some reason you're trying to bump a contingent offer with your non-contingent offer, then you would check this purchase agreement is contingent to that first one being canceled. You know you're in second position. That's what this part is 250 through 255 is to deal with an offer being in the second position. And waiting for the first one to cancel. Okay,
But how do you know?
talking to listing agent. That first conversation with the listing agent, you should be, you know, and in the MLS, it's a, you know, if it's listed as active with an S or active with an O, you know, it's contingent upon something else. Find out if it's crashing or not.
So this is what you put in if it was already contingent.
If you're trying to bump another offer, this is where you would deal with that, right in this area. Title, warranty deed is gonna be most of the time what you're gonna check. If you're dealing with a POA, attorney in fact, it's gonna be a personal representative deed. There's a little bit less, you know, if you remember back, you had your whole bundle of things that get transferred under a warranty deed. Personal deed, some of those get taken away. Trust deed, they start changing a little bit. So you're gonna need to deal with what type of deed you're dealing with. The most common one I'm seeing these days is trust. A lot of people have put their houses into trust. And so it's gotta come out with a trustee's deed. And that's a whole different thing. You gotta get an attorney involved and stuff like that. So check what type of deed it's gonna be. 90% of the time, it's gonna be warranty deed. And the reason, if you'll find out that it's gonna be personal representative or a trustee's deed, agents usually put that in the agent remarks. So you know you're dealing with that. Or if you went back and you did your tax pull-up, you're gonna see Bill and Mary Smith trustees. It will be on the title, or it'll be in the contract or county records. So that's the other spot that you might know it's a trustee. And then we know about what it's subject to. Possession immediately after closing is the only box you should check, unless you're doing a rent back. Because your client, as soon as they own the home, they're liable for it. So if a seller moving out sprains their ankle, twists it, gets hurt, moving their stuff out after it's closed, it's technically the liability of your buyer. I had an attorney point this out to me. That there's no way I would ever let anybody in my house after I own it. Not even on the property. So that's immediately, unless you're doing a rent back. Okay. Link devices, this is all kind of standard stuff, so I'm not gonna go through all that stuff unless somebody has questions about that. If they do, come to my purchase agreement class. And I will explain all that. Risk of loss, this is a good one that I just want to touch on because this was another interesting story I came across in my years of doing this. It says that the risk of loss is upon the seller if something would happen to that property. But it says it's the buyer's option to proceed. I had one where the seller house, it wasn't a deal I was working on, but the seller told me that their house burned to the ground under contract. The buyer got a brand new freaking house. And the seller in the transaction took like 6-8 months to close. Seller was stuck for those 8 months. Couldn't do anything. So if you really want to rewrite this, you'd put it's at the seller or the buyer's option. Because that seller would have loved to cancel that contract and sold an empty lot and moved on, take his insurance money, sell the lot, and be on his way. He was stuck. I don't change it. But just a story that could happen. So. Yeah, the contract was full in force. Yeah, they got a brand new house for what with the. You're around this long enough, you hear all the horror stories, but that was an interesting one. So Time of the essence, the only way I know how to explain this line is that the dates in the purchase agreement need to be adhered to. So our inspection timelines, our written letter guidelines, those all have to be adhered to. We know about calculations of days. I always touch on this part when I write a purchase agreement, how the earnest money gets released if it doesn't close, well, how the earnest money gets released. Successful closing, an agreement between both parties who gets it upon a cancellation, or the other two options are going to court. Point that out because this was never part of our purchase agreements, but it's become a stickling point. And like I said, my theory about earnest money,
How do you point it out?
just read it
Oh, really?
and read it to them and make sure they understand this.
Okay.
Okay. Default. That's all that, we know all that part there. This is kind of basics after this is what boxes we check and things like that, so. Home protection plan. I haven't used a lot of them, but if you're going to be using one, make sure you fill out this information, who pays for it and who the company is gonna be. So, agency relationship, we just disclosed that, you guys are pretty familiar with that part. Yeah. This is all standard stuff down here. Other is where you might want to put in, the repairs that are going to be done to the property. If there's anything, I'm trying to think of what people have put in there.
That the appraisal gap.
The appraisal gap might fit there better than up under the other part.
If you are related to the.
Somebody's related, yeah. I mean, you guys probably come up with other, the things that don't fit the normal purchase agreement. Here's an idea, put that in there.
If the sellers are looking for a house, my success for closing time.
So different others, anything that's not covered there, that's also what an addendum is used for. Is if you need to have additional things that's not gonna fit on those lines, use an addendum. And everybody here knows the difference between an addendum and amendment, right? Amendments used after a contract is signed only. And don't use an addendum after. That's another spot where you're gonna be shown as a newer agent. Is when you're when you're amending your contract and you're sending it over as an addendum. You will be aced out at the moment, and a lot of experienced agents, I get them from experienced agents too, so it's not the worst thing in the world, but just understand, you wanna look professional. Amendment amends the contract, addendum adds to the contract, so that's the way to look at it. And then down here, you're gonna check what things apply. The biggest thing is that we use a lot is this one, and lead-based paint. I think the word is lead-based paint. Those are probably the ones that we use the most. If you're dealing with a septic system and a well, that would be one that you're gonna check also. And if you're doing any type of rent back. So that is pretty much the purchase agreement. Any questions on the contract? Okay. All right, so I'd walk you through that. It's explained a lot of places where agents make mistakes. Standard terms for, kind of went through all that. All right. Oops, I gotta go back to. Here's gonna give me, there's a weld broken on it. All right. So another thing, review your contract. Go through it, look, see if you make mistakes. Even after I send it in Authentisign, I read it from the bottom back up. Because I know where I'm supposed to be putting stuff. Or make your eyes read it a different way.
Good idea.
You have your eyes read it a different way, you'll find out places that you missed, okay? Yeah. And don't do it after 3 or 4 rum and cokes. Just kidding.
They'll celebrate too early, is what you're saying?
Yes. No, it's called relaxing for the end of the day. Make sure your buyer understands the contract. You know, you're gonna deal with different buyers, different sophistications, if it's their first house, if it's their 10th house. I really, if at all possible, sit down in front of a first-time buyer with the contract. Explaining every paragraph, every line, what it means to them. And like I said earlier, their excitement, sometimes they don't listen to half of it. Sometimes they get overwhelmed by everything that you're putting in, and it also just become, do it. So, but make sure you review it. You know, if your buyer doesn't get the first offer, the second offer can be done electronically on the phone. You've walked them through it. You know, you need just to put price and terms and conditions in. You can walk it through the second time, or if they're an experienced person, deal with it, you know, that way. So, and then, yeah, we talked about all that. Know what is essential in your area. We covered all of that. It's common. We talked about rookie mistakes. All right. Is anybody just overwhelmed by what I said?
No. I think we kind of shared our ahas as we were going.
Okay. And I'm supposed to be done in 2 hours, aren't I? And that means you guys have to do less classwork, right? Keep talking, Rob, right?
The weird thing is they have a schedule from 9 to 12, and generally we end up getting through all the information within about 2 hours. And then it says in the book, okay, now go do your own work for 2 hours. It's like, there's only an hour left. What are you talking about?
I was reading it. I was talking to Drew too. He goes, yeah, the last hour you kind of just, I'm here to answer questions and oversee you doing your work. Okay. So we are on to receiving offers or presenting the offers. I think so this is before you send it up. One thing, it's a pet peeve of mine. Order documents logically. I don't know. I get these purchase agreements with the arbitration after the seller's disclosure statement. I like it to flow. I think a purchase agreement should the PA, the arbitration, an addendum. And if you got other contingencies like sewer, condominium, those go after seller's disclosure at the end. I don't, just make it logically flow. I've had people send me over purchase agreements. I have to print it, rearrange it, scan it back in so I can send it off to my seller to sign. Pain in my butt. So do that. If you want things go well and you want to look like a professional out there. So when you deal with the listing agent again, 6 months later, you're seen as a professional with him, or then do that. Email a summary. Always check. A lot of agents now, I'd say probably about half of the people are asking for, they're in their supplements, they got an offer summary they want you to fill out. Make sure you do what the listing agent wants you to do. It's gonna make everything go better. Notify the listing agent that you sent the offer over. Email it and say, please let me know if you have any questions, and please let me know you received it. Text him and tell him that, him or her, that it's on its way and confirm receipt. A year and a half ago, I had multiple offers on a listing, and we verbally accepted one. Hadn't sent it to my seller for signatures yet. Agent calls me, goes, did you get my offer? I said, got 5 of them. I didn't see yours. It was in my spam folder from yesterday. It was the best offer. It was the best offer. If he had called 30 minutes later, he was done. His buyer would not have got that house. I had to back out of the other offer so that my seller could accept the best offer. But that's what we do. It was a horrible phone call to make to an agent after I told him verbally that their buyers got the house. Call back and say, no, they didn't. It was a shitty phone call to make. But that was the situation. That buyer agent almost lost that house for the buyer. So make sure they received it. And then add all documents to command. That's what Nikki's great at. I used to do it all by myself. Believe me, I started using Nikki last fall when I got busy. Heaven sent. Nikki is great. She is great. She makes me look better. Because she follows up on shit I don't follow up on. So that's my thoughts on that. We'll skip that part. Now we're going to, you're the listing agent now, okay? So we put on your listing hat. So when you receive these offers, make sure they're complete. Make sure that, all the spots are checked out, that somebody hasn't made a mistake like I talked about earlier. You know, where they put in 0.5% instead of or $3 instead of 3% for closing costs. Make sure that stuff is done right. Confirm receipt, so let the agent know you received it. If you know a time frame when you're gonna present it, let them know when it might be presented. And then get the offer to the seller in a timely manner. We need to do that. They might not act on it. They might not do anything with it, but get it to them so they have it and they can think about it. Create an executive summary. So when I review an offer, I got a piece of paper, I had nothing formal, and you can make up a formal checklist if you want, but I write down, what's the price? What's my earnest money? Where's my closing date? What type of terms we have? FHA, conventional, VA, closing costs, any other special terms. I just make a summary as I go through that purchase agreement and I write it on a piece of paper and write down everything so that when I call the seller, I can say, here's the bullet points. And if I have multiple offers, I do it on every multiple offer also. And I keep those notes in my file. They get filed in to cover my ass if ever needed. So that's my executive summary, how I do it. If somebody else might have a different way of doing it for their sellers, but that's what I do. Call buyer's agent. Yes, if you have any questions about the offer, might need to contact the buyer's agent. Call the lender. Very, very important step. And I tell my sellers in my listing presentation, when I'm getting their listing, that I will call every lender on every purchase agreement we get. And make that statement to them so that they know I'm researching them. I'm making sure that those buyers can close. And so you want to ask questions when you call the lender. You want to ask, where are we at? Have you pulled a credit report? Have you done income verifications and job verifications? Have you had any, or have you verified the bank statements? Where the cash is coming from? We can't ask questions like how much do they have or anything like that, but you can ask if you verified it. You want to know where they're at in this process. If the person, because I've had ones where the person just filled out the application online. And based on quick desktop underwriting, I got a letter. I call, find out what it's based on. Oh, they filled out the application online. They've done nothing with the background work. It could have been all bull crap that was put into the application. It could all be not true. And now I'm a week down the road with this client, with this buyer, and I find out that none of that's true.
What about if, question, what about if it falls on a Saturday or Sunday and that lender isn't opened? Then what do you do?
Put a contingency in there, that you spoke to the loan officer. Like I've had a situation where I've got a purchase agreement, but it's been a weekend, I don't have a lender letter. And so I will accept that purchase agreement contingent upon getting that lender letter by noon on Monday. So that's how I've dealt with that.
You do have the letter though. I mean, it comes in with the approval letter coming in with the PA offer and everything. But
Okay.
like you said, if you want to call the lender to verify where are they at this time of in the game, and it's the weekend, do you still present the PA offer to your seller?
Most definitely. And I would explain to them, I have not spoke to this loan officer. They work at a credit union and they're not around on the weekends. So I won't be able to verify this information on Monday. How do you want to proceed? I've had them wait until Monday before they sign the purchase agreement.
Gotcha.
I'm not going to sign this. I just explain where we're at. And what I'd like to do, you know, if somebody's coming in with a 25% down offer. And it's a letter from Bell Bank, and I've worked with Brian Connors before. But I can't reach Brian Connors because he's with his family on the weekend. I'm okay with that. I know Brian and I've worked with him. He's not gonna put an approval letter out there that's not good, you know, and then you'll learn who are good lenders and who are so-so lenders, and we have a lot of new lenders entering this market. So be careful with that, but always make your phone call. Yeah, I had one recently that the lender looked like they were shaky. I'd never heard of them. Did research, Googled them, talked to him. He actually has offices in 4 different states, but he looked a little bit shaky to me. So do your due diligence. And then create an outline document to reference when you call the sellers. That's my summary sheet that I do. Okay, just in my notes here, I got highlighted, make sure I explain about fair housing. That we can't discriminate. I always tell them when we get to that part of the purchase agreement where it says, we need to hear fair housing, I said, if their money's green, we need to accept it. And so that's my line I use, you're welcome to use it, so.
For a little blue tip to it, but, you know.
I guess it's not green anymore. So that's what I say when I get to that point. Net sheet. Do people need a break? I've been talking for 2 hours up here.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Okay, let's go take a break. Let's take 5 minutes because I could use, my mouth is kind of dry and I could use the restroom myself, so let's take 5.
Sounds great.
How's it going, Marjorie?
Not too bad, yourself?
I'm tired.
Yeah, I hear you, me too. Sorry you, had to.
Shannon, what happened? I'm like, I ran out of gas.
I get it. You've been going
That was me
down
yesterday.
You mean your car or like you?
Me. My eyes are practically swollen shut. Oh my God.
Yep. That made me yesterday.
I made Michelle tell me the points last night on the group coaching call, and you're like ahead of Louis and I by like 100 points. Like, what in the hell? You've been kicking ass. I'm impressed.
Because I've been contacting lots
That's
of
what she
people.
said, and that's awesome.
And I send out, well, let's see, I sent out 2 sets of postcards of 100 each.
You wanna hear what I listen to when I wake up? This gets your ass out of bed.
Oh my
real fast.
God.
I went to hear it. Oh, well. I was like, nope, I don't need it.
Oh, it's bad. That's my one.
Yeah, my husband. Oh, yeah. I bet. Fair point.
It's a channel called Fearless Motivation. So that's what makes me up at 4:20
We used to. a long time
tried
ago.
doing that with the song Peaceful Easy Feeling by the Eagles. I know that song.
Oh, I used to do it
Well,
with,
that's why, it's a peaceful evening.
so I do that one or this one.
Yeah, I used to have time.
And that's about where I roll over, turn off the alarm,
Yeah.
put my shorts on, and walk out to my garage barefoot.
Oh, I bet. I bet.
Get in my car, make it to the gym by 4:45, kickbox till 6 a.m. Come home and take a shower by 6:05, and I'm back in bed with my wife.
I'm gonna be tired. Just like-
And then at 6:25, I wake up, get the kids up, and then we start.
Thanks.
Did I work?
Thanks.
I work late. I get more done if I, like, if I get up in the morning on Saturday and try and clean my house, I will not be done by the end of the day. If I wait and start at 2:00 in the afternoon, I'm gonna have savings.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, and then I go to bed.
Yeah.
You know what?
I was good at 10 o'clock last night, barely.
I know, I went to bed at 10, I was like, holy smokes, this is the earliest I've been.
Getting old.
Like tonight I work until
11, when I get home, you could have dinner again.
You must have a time.
Right, one's up there.
And then, yeah,
So-
Yeah.
and then after that, I go to bed at like 12:30 before morning.
All right. Yeah, as no,
They'll get a certain investment, so we'll do something.
my thyroid.
Probably.
So I'm wondering, like, really?
That's.
Not the, like, like, screen.
Yeah, so he sent me the address and it's to finish. We just went both sides, so I think 2 sides. I'm like. Perfect.
Yeah.
Enough rent. Probably be able to rent it out for enough. One's worried about it.
Yeah.
And the new place is not gonna be as high as his current price was.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get a PPI.
It was. It was.
Nifty and thrifty, it's a lot.
If you can't do that, there goes all of my contingency plan.
Right? You don't wanna be in that place either, that's your.
I'm like, I don't wanna go into the more than try to make this happen. We should.
And too many friends that are close.
Not only that, we got 5 records. So we get it.
Yeah.
Like, if we have a little more room. It's great.
What if that takes 4 or 5 months? You know what I mean? Like, you don't know.
But I did find it.
No, there's too many berries sold 2 years ago. Be bad.
But it was,
Okay.
and it just hit the market too. So you gotta go out.
All right, we got everybody back? All right. Do people use an estimated proceed sheet for their sellers? Okay, so you're familiar with these. Real handy to have. If you ever need help filling one out, I'd be happy to go through a class and just on how to do this. Yeah, I'm trying to think. This was something I helped develop and there was couple things in here that. Now I
Is that
guess
spreadsheet somewhere we have access to, is that yours there?
this is in the actually in a transaction desk.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I was using one of Travis's all the time, but
Yeah, this is one that in our forms, our standard forms that we listed in there. So,
Would that be considered the closing information sheet?
no, here's where I found it. Here, I'll close this out.
Well, I'm just asking because, Anne, I just had a closing. And she said if you could just make sure to include on the closing information sheet, a note to pay the 10% to Michelle.
Oh, that would be on the closing sheet where you put the sellers, the buyers, the listing agent, buyer agent, all of that. There's on the very end of there's a section there. It says, other referrals or something at the very end of it. So that would be the closing info sheet. This is proceeds. So what I did is I just went to forms under transaction desk, and then typed in proceeds. There it is. Create new standalone form. So there it is. Okay. So make sure you do one of those with your seller. It helps you make sure that you get all the line items, also in there. If you want to have them sign it, because it does say at the bottom, this is only an estimate, so it will cover your ass if you, made a mistake on it. But yeah. Usually. So that's that one. Okay, okay. The next day is, next one talks about creating an offering command. Find somebody who knows more than I do. Drew, I don't know if our forms in command, like, can you draft a Minnesota PA out of command?
I don't believe.
Okay, well, all right, next step.
We'll go into your opportunity, in a form, you could.
Yeah. Nick will be teaching that class next week.
Well, you can upload it, then you can go ahead and edit.
So you could do it.
Yeah, I think it's originated. Oh. Okay.
Yeah, all right.
Wait, is there a cool backdoor that I just didn't know about?
Okay, you've reviewed the offer, now what do you do to respond to it? Seller has three options. They can counter the offer, accept it as written, or reject it. I've had very few rejections in my years of doing this, that a seller has just flat out said no. But sometimes they're obnoxiously low or got some terms that the seller might just say, no, bring me back a better offer. Here's what. And in that situation, what I do is I communicate back to the buyer's agent, said, no, the seller really doesn't want anything below this and they want this, and if you can come to terms on that, bring us an offer. But I've had sellers just flat out reject it. And there's nothing you really need to do to flat out reject it. But you should send an email to the buyer's agent saying your offer's been rejected. Then it kind of cancels things. You're done with that offer. Unless there's a signature on it by a seller, you do not need to do a cancellation. But it's just a flat out rejection. Except, pardon,
Unless there's a signature.
unless the sellers have signed on it, there's no reason you need to do a cancellation. Because some people say, I got to do a cancellation, or I got to do something to reject that offer. Technically, no.
There is no actual law.
There is nothing, yeah, nothing on that. So accepts the offer, we got that, counters the offer, we know what happens there, you go back and forth. Let's see here. You be ready to your conversations with some sellers will be bingo, bango, bongo, in 5 minutes, they've accepted the offer. Other ones really need to get into the terms. I email them, so if I'm in a multiple offer situation, I take the offer and I email it to them when it's received. Even though we might be talking, we're not gonna talk until 6 o'clock and I received it at 10 o'clock in the morning. I email it to them, let them start reviewing it, so let them start reading it. And along with the approval letter, so they know the person's approved. So that's my process of doing it, is I forward the email to them, but I'm gonna have an in-depth conversation with them about that purchase agreement. But I at least let them read it. Then when we talk, they can ask me questions about different terms if they've read it. If they haven't read it, not a problem. I just start from the beginning and go through it and explain to them exactly kind of the way I went through with you guys. On that purchase agreement, I just go through and hit the highlights with them of what it means. And if there's anything, I always stop and talk about title, the title part examination. It's one spot I leave a little bit more conversation time for. The financing, spend a little bit more time on financing when I'm going through, when I'm reviewing, this is reviewing on the phone. I spend a little bit more time on the financing, just so they make sure they understand the financing, what's going to be happening with the buyer's financing and inspections. That's where I really spend the most time when I'm reviewing on a phone with somebody, is those three areas of the purchase agreement. You know, all the standard writing and all that other stuff in there, I kind of breeze over, but where you can fill in blanks or check different boxes and make sure I'm discussing that portion in depth with the seller. Denise, you look like you had a question? Okay. Just looking at, I'll come back to that one. And here's a note, my notes, keep the tone positive, you know, and nothing derogatory about the agent, the buyers, or anything like that. Keep it all positive and keep your tone on a mellow. And if your sellers are excited and stuff, get the excitement, but bring it back down to a conversational tone. You'll be more effective when you're just talking than if somebody's exciting or screaming or angry or something like that. So, okay. And if you need to, in my notes here, it states you may need to pull out your market analysis again when you're presenting to a seller. You might get an offer that, you know, let's say you said the house should be priced at 300, they wanted to go 350. And you get an offer of 3.25. Bring them back to your CMA and say, you know what, my recommended level is 300. This is 325. It's above where I thought it would be. Bring it back to that. Let them remember that. Because like I said, a lot of stuff there. We throw a lot of stuff at them. They forget stuff. So bring it back to them. Go back to that market analysis. I closing one next month. I said 2.25. They said, let's go 235. Week on the market, we reduced it to 2.25 and got an offer. So I brought them back to where my market was. So it works. And recent sales, you know, if you've been on the market for 30 days and you get that offer, after that 30th day, you might want to go back and look at what other activity has been going on around your listing. And you should be doing that anyways. If you're not paying attention to what's happening in 2 to 3 miles around your listing, what properties are coming on the market and going off the market, you're not doing a good job. Plain and simple. Watch around your listing. So when your seller goes up, oh, hey, Bill and Mary Smith house just came on the market. And you're like, oh, really? You know it. Say, oh yeah, I saw the pictures. It looks like a nice house, but I think ours is better. Know it. Know what's happening around you. That wasn't in my notes, but I'll say that. Let's see here. Responding to the offer. So how do you respond to the offer? You can do that, writing with a written counter offer signed by your sellers is the best way to do it. Because then if the buyer says yes, they can ink that counter offer addendum and you're done. It's not always how it happens. I mean, I've had situations where I go, well, you wrote it 400, the sellers really want 405, and I call the agent, and I talk to them and say, is that going to be working out, or can they come up with more down payment? Whatever the terms are. I've made the call many times verbally and verbally negotiate it before I put it down on a counter offer addendum to know if it's even worth my time to do. So, if something's crazy, if you got a crazy offer, verbally is okay to negotiate. But like I said, best in writing is always the best, and then it's done. You don't have to go hunt around for signatures and things like that. And just keep remembering that whatever side you're on, is if you're a buyer or seller, when your counter offer is made, negotiations are still open. Other offers can come in. You could be bumped. So don't drag your feet on counter offers. Try to wrap them up so that your client does not get aced out on the sale or on their purchase. So just respond to things quickly. And then only disclose things that your clients tell you to disclose. Okay. And ask them, what can I disclose? My story earlier about the adult child with learning disabilities. I asked, can I use that? I said, can I state that? And they said, yes, we'd like you to use that. I have another situation where I'm working with some people that they're buying a house so that her brother can come live in the basement because he's got mobility issues. And so when we found the right ramblers and written offers, we haven't got one together. I don't know how many we're up to, but I include that. They told me I can include that if it's going to better their offer, but I've always asked what you can say, because you can't disclose anything seller doesn't tell you to disclose. And be very careful about that, because it's really easy as a listing agent to slip up and let something slide. So be very careful about your conversations. Take that extra second or two and take a breath before you answer a question to the buyer's agent or something. Just make sure you're protecting your client. That's our job. Okay. The next one I think was, no, I missed a page in here. It was talking about, missed a slide somewhere, but doesn't matter. Multiple offers. I've kind of talked a little bit about multiple offers and that type of situation. One thing with multiple offers, you may want to sit with the seller. I would recommend sitting with the seller and lay the offers out So they can see, and what I do is I just use a yellow pad of paper. I'm really a simple person. I just got the summary on top of that one, this one, this one. You can quickly get down to two to discuss, but when multiple offers, I like doing it in person. Because there's a lot of complexity to multiple offers and how to deal with multiple offers. Because one might have a good down payment, but a lower price. One might be a slimmer buyer with an FHA mortgage, but they're the best price. There's lots of stuff to talk with about your seller. So if you're in a multiple offer situation, bring them into the office, go sit at their kitchen table. It will make it go easier. Okay. And highest and best is not always the best. Taking the highest offer is not always the best offer. So there's different things to deal with that, appraisals, things like that. So, talk with yourself, just be honest. Tell them your gut feelings, you're their advisor and what you're thinking and what you're feeling based on the feedback you've gotten from the agent, the representing the buyer, the loan officer representing the buyer. There's some times where your gut just tells you what to do. Okay. And explain that it's ultimately your seller's decision, but express everything you're thinking. Don't hold back from your seller because you want the deal to go together. You're not doing your job if you do that. If you get multiple offers, what I would recommend, if you're calling for highest and best, get it in the MLS, get Jana to change the agent remarks. It's real simple in MLS to notify everybody who's shown the house that you're calling for highest and best by Friday at 5. Real simple system. Make sure you broadcast that because if you don't, you're not doing the job for your seller.
Where is that
To broadcast would be your agent remarks. Or to broadcast to everybody who's shown it, you got to go into your listing in transaction desk, find your listing, and there's a way to notify all the agents that have shown it that you're calling for highest and best. You'd also use that for price reductions or anything like that you want to send out a notification to their agents. So make sure you get it out there.
Thing that I was gonna say, one time I missed, you could look, some people have accidentally opted out of getting notifications. I had a realtor get really mad at me because he didn't get something from me, like on our highest and best. And then I noticed in that showing time, he had opted out of, he didn't know that he had opted out of notifications. There's a little.
I've seen that. Can you opt him in? Or once
I don't think I can. I can send a direct message, but I didn't even know
Okay.
that I should. Now I look, and if somebody's not on there, I'll text.
Yeah, they opted out. That's an aha for me. I've never thought about looking at the people that opted out. I figured the people who opted out don't care if they get a message about it. So,
I got yelled at.
but I could see that. So, yeah, it's. Yeah.
No, then you're
Mhm.
out of one.
So those are kind of the protocols. You do not need to call for highest and best. The one I talked about where I got it accepted in 8 hours. That agent told me she got yelled at by other agents. Why didn't you call for highest and best? Why didn't you go 2 more days of showing? She got lambasted by other agents yelling at her. She did what the seller wanted. That's all she had to explain to them. But you don't have to call for highest and best. And, I had one this spring that kind of morphed into a highest and best. We had an offer come in and we weren't getting any others. And then half a day later, we started getting some more interest and the seller just said, let's just tell everybody I'm making a decision Saturday morning by 9. We didn't really say you got a deadline, but we just let everybody know sellers make a decision Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. So I guess we did call highest and best, but I didn't put it in the MLS. I didn't do all that. I just, all the interested people who had shown it, I let them know. So you can do it however the seller chooses. Seller is in control. Okay. You can advise them, but they are in control. Okay. And if you ever have any, my notes just say, it's a tricky situation. So if you ever have any, a situation like that, reach out to the broker, reach out to somebody more experienced in the office to help guide you through it. We've all been there. Responding to offer, okay, so the daily success systems, I guess that's where I'm at now. Is to ask how you guys are doing on that, I guess. Is that what I'm supposed to be doing? You guys have been through all these classes, not me. Okay, so I hope I helped in how I communicate with my sellers and buyers and what I do. I hope it all helped. And just,
You did great.
Great.
thank you.
Thank you. We get the most out of the classes when the teachers go off script a little bit.
That's
Better than what they write.
Yeah.
You can thank Denise for that. She said, she told me to give life examples today, so. Yeah. And anytime you guys got questions and, come to my, classes about, writing purchase agreements. I think next week I'm doing buyer forms. So if you want to listen to how I present buyer forms, I'm good at that. I'm
When
just-
do you do that?
That is the 3rd at 1 o'clock, I think, April 3rd at 1.
And it's on the calendar.
It should be on the calendar. Yep, Jenna lined it up last week with me, so. So I will pull together, if I can figure out how to get all my clauses into one spot here. We'll print that out for you guys. Get a better angle. Or ask me questions too. Not going away yet. Come on, this is too slippery. All right.
I'm gonna hug you.
Isn't it, the state?
I'm just looking for a blank one.
Oh, yeah, no,